Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Monday, February the 6th, and our capital budget meeting day. I'd like to start with a territorial acknowledgement. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather, land on which we are broadcasting from today, is a land traditionally cared for by the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We also acknowledge the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today. I'd also like to take a moment of reflection. At the beginning of this council meeting, we pause to think about the needs of our community. May we show wisdom and compassion in all our decisions. And I also want to take a moment to recognize that it is Black History Month and that people in Canada celebrate the many achievements and contributions of Black Canadians and their communities who, throughout history, have done so much to make Canada a culturally diverse, compassionate, and prosperous country. We will hear more about Black History Month later this evening in our second half of our council meeting. Council, I'd like to check on a disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof as we head into the capital project. Councillor Vasic, was there anything that?
Well, it's a non-routine item, so I don't suspect it's going to come up today. But
Okay.
If it was, I was going to just declare it at the time. But I can,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, thank you. Council approval of minutes from the previous meeting, January the 16th. Moved by Councillor Hanmer, seconded by Councillor Rowe. All in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. So we're on to staff reports. And before we get started, I just wanted to make a few comments. I'm just looking at Julie. Did you want to speak before I did? Okay. So in a few minutes, members of our finance team will be sharing a brief overview of the capital budget review day process and goals. This is the next step on the budget 2023 approval journey, building upon the departmental business plan presentations that have been shared over the past 3 weeks. As outlined in the agenda, we will review each department individually. Each commissioner and the Waterloo Public Library CEO will provide a brief departmental capital overview presentation. The presentations will focus on capital reporting classifications. Projects are classified as either routine or non-routine. And after each departmental presentation, council will have the opportunity to ask questions of the department with regard to their capital projects. Finance staff will display the routine project list for each department on the screen. This is the same listing found in the Agenda Staff Report Corp 2023-04, Appendix A through E. All of the capital projects are found in the capital budget book released on December 12th, 2022. The corresponding pages are noted in the council packet, and staff will also confirm the applicable capital budget book pages as part of their presentation. Staff are also able to display any capital project sheet on the screen that may be needed for additional details. I will be looking around the horseshoe to see if any member of council wishes to flag any changes to the classification of any project. We will note any changes and vote on the classifications one department at a time. Finance staff will track the approval of the project classifications. Any changes made today by council will be incorporated into the 2023 budget for approval next Monday, February 13th, 2023. Undertaking the work of capital project classification is an important step in the capital budget approval process. As a reminder, all projects, regardless of classification, will return for formal approval next Monday. Following that approval, routine projects can start immediately without returning to council. Projects that are classified as non-routine are required to return to council with a more detailed funding release report before staff can initiate the project. This project classification process has worked well as part of past budgets. It allows for an efficient review and approval of the capital budget on February 13th because Council will complete the important review today by considering each project as routine or non-routine. Please keep this in mind as staff take us forward as we begin our review of the capital budget and the project reporting classifications. So I'm going to just make this really simple. If there's a capital project that you have a keen interest in knowing more about, I highly recommend, but you want to keep it in the budget, I highly recommend you move it over to non-routine, because then that way you'll get a fulsome report and you'll have opportunities to ask lots of questions about it at that time. If there's something in the budget that you don't want in the budget, then we need to discuss that today and take it off the list entirely. It's not going to be routine or non-routine. It needs to come off. So if that makes sense in kind of in layman's term, how we're going to approach this. Is there any questions on that process? I realize that those comments weren't quite as well written as what I said earlier, but I'm looking at Philippa to see if I messed anything up there. No. Okay, so if there's no more questions, I'm going to turn it over to staff and they'll start walking us through this process. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Council, staff, and residents. Today, Council will review the 2023 proposed capital budget and 2024 to 2032 capital forecast. This review will take place by department, and Council will have the opportunity to ask questions of staff on specific projects, potentially make changes to project classifications, and ultimately approve the final project routine and non-routine classifications to be included in the 2023 capital budget, which Council will then consider for approval on Budget Day, February 13th. Before Council begins this process, I would like to provide a brief overview. A total of 319 capital projects are planned across the 10-year capital projection, and 196 of those projects have proposed funding in 2023 for a total of just under $113 million. The 2023 proposed capital budget is reflective of the focus on replacement and rehabilitation of the city's infrastructure, with 56% of 2023 capital dollars budgeted for infrastructure renewal. The classification of capital projects as routine or non-routine was an efficiency introduced in the 2016 to 2018 budget process. It has since resulted in a reduction in the number of reports for Council to review, reduced staff time spent on writing reports for approval of routine projects, and allows routine project-related work to begin immediately following budget approval. The 2023 proposed capital budget has 162 projects of the 196 that have been identified as routine. However, these represent only 44% of the 2023 proposed capital funding. This is reflective of the typically smaller size and standard nature of routine projects. After Budget Day, these projects would be permitted to commence. 56% of the 2023 proposed capital funding is tied to 34 projects that have been identified as non-routine and fall within one of three criteria. Projects with financial materiality greater than $2.5 million in the 1-year budget window, projects of high public or council interest, and projects requested to be non-routine by Council. After Budget Day, these projects would return to Council before commencement to provide Council with a project update and to request release of the associated funding. The more standard nature of the 2023 projects classified as routine is also reflected in the funding source breakdown, with routine projects primarily funded through the city's main tax-based and enterprise reserves and reserve funds. Non-routine projects, however, utilize a wider variety of sources, including funding from external partners, developers, and proposed debenture financing. When considering the merits of a capital project, it is also important to consider the impact that the project will have on future operating costs. The operating impact of a new facility, for example, would include upkeep and maintenance of the building, furniture and fixtures, additional staffing needs, utility costs, and many other costs, in order for the facility to provide services on a day-to-day basis. These new costs, not yet included in the city's base operating budget, are a future operating pressure and need to be considered in conjunction with the capital cost. As information, the report before you today includes the estimated operating impact of both the routine and non-routine projects proposed in 2023, and the timing of when those impacts are anticipated to be realized. For today, after Council has had the opportunity to review and discuss the projects for each department, staff are seeking Council's approval of the routine project classifications for 2023. This will be considered department by department as per the listings found in Report Corp 2023-004, Appendices A through E. The full proposed capital program for each department can be found in the capital budget book, released on December 12th, with the Office of the Chief Administrative Officer on pages 13 through 15, the Waterloo Public Library on page 41, Corporate Services Department on pages 23 through 28, Community Services Department on pages 16 to 22, and the Integrated Planning and Public Works Department on pages 29 through 40. The associated pages for each department are also listed on today's agenda for additional reference. After project classifications are approved today, the 2023 proposed capital budget will then return for Council consideration and approval on February 13th, 2023, or Budget Day. In addition, today, after the Integrated Planning and Public Works Department capital presentation, staff are seeking Council's direction in regards to the 4 options provided in today's report concerning reference 600, the Beaver Creek Road and Conservation Drive reconstruction project. And so if there are no questions on my presentation, I will turn the podium over to Tim Anderson, our CAO, to start us off with the first departmental capital budget presentation for the Office of the CAO.
So I just wanted to see if there was any questions of Julie.
If council wants to consider the motion to approve the report, which is really just essentially receiving the report and then subsequently the other recommendations in each section.
Sure, I can do that. Is there a motion to receive the report? Moved by Councillor Rowe, seconded by Councillor Hanmer. All in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. I see no questions on Julie's presentation, so Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Councillor Freeman. We'll just bring the presentation up here and begin. So thank you. It's my pleasure, Councillor Freeman, Mayor, members of Council, to kick off the capital budget review this afternoon with the CAO's office. I'm joined again this week with Sandy Little, Executive Officer to the CAO, Justin McFadden, Director of Economic Development, Sanjay Govindaraj, our Director of Indigenous Initiatives, Anti-Racism, Accessibility and Equity, and Estero Kologeropoulos is here, our Manager of Arts and Culture. And together we'll be able to respond to questions after a few short slides here. And I'll keep it brief. There are 5 in total slides, and just to kind of give a little bit of a snapshot of our overall capital program. In the CAO's area, our 10-year forecast is just under $33 million. And for 2023 specifically, we have $8.5 million allocated. And that is driven primarily by the land development line project reference 111 and 112, which totals 5.87 million of that 8.5 million. And this is for the completion of the generation parklands on the west side of Waterloo. And as well, the city of Waterloo retains some employment lands over on the east side of Waterloo near Rim Park. Again, unserviced, and these are some significant allocations for land servicing. Another view of our 10-year program sorted by project type is shown on the screen here, and it shows a significant investment in growth, primarily again driven by that economic development side of our capital program. And that totals 54% rehabilitation, 26%, and the remaining 20% is allocated to other. And that's for things like the strategic initiatives, our arts and culture investment, and some of the placeholder dollars for capital grant opportunities. Another view of our capital projects aligned with the strategic plan, strategic pillars, again illustrated on the screen in 2023 for the full year, and then over the 10-year horizon. And you can see, not surprisingly, we see strong amount of investment in the economic growth pillar, economic development and growth pillar, and both in the 2023 year and over the 10-year horizon. So our final slide is detailed on the screen here, and this is really the essence of Councillor Freeman's remarks and Julie's remarks. It's the work of council today in terms of classification of routine and non-routine projects. And if a project is left routine and it advances through the budget approval process next Monday, then staff are given the authority to keep moving ahead and expedite delivery of those projects as quickly as possible. The non-routine ones would return back to council for further consideration in individual reports. And my last slide, and maybe the best one, is the picture slide. And this is just a reflection of some of the past capital investments through the CAO department. Bottom left is the west side of Waterloo, the new generation park. Upper left and bottom right are some arts and culture investments over the course of time. And the remaining two slides are part of the CIP investment in facade programs in the uptown area. So that concludes the CAO department presentation, Councillor Freeman, and I'll open it up for questions.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to my colleagues. Any questions for Mr. Anderson and his team? Seeing none, there's recommendation 2, 3, and 4 that relate entirely to the routine and non-routine classifications for Mr. Anderson's team. Is there any of the projects listed there that council would like to reallocate from routine to non-routine? Oh, you have a question? Okay, Councillor Bodley has a question.
Thank you. Sorry, I wasn't quite ready. You're trying to get through till 5 o'clock. Before 5, I got you. My question was, I'm going to piece together a couple of items that are in here. One is 134 and 141. So 134 is basically TRC, Truth and Reconciliation implementation, and 141 is Transform WR. I'm not asking for these to be non-routine, but because they are routine items, I did want to ask a question, which is, was there any consideration given on either of these items to front load some of the funding to, particularly when it comes to the Transform WR stuff, to, a greenhouse gas emission that is eliminated today is far more valuable than one that is eliminated five or 10 years from now. And I see we have sort of equal amounts throughout the many years of these items. And I'm wondering if there was any consideration given to front loading either of those, either the Truth and Reconciliation implementation or the Transform WR implementation. Any comments on that?
Thank you, Councillor Bodley. Through you, Councillor Freeman. Very good question. Those are annual allocations as I'm looking at the projects here. And Sandy and Sanjay may want to add to it, but maybe just as an offering, The allocations are spread out, kind of part of the balancing project for the CAO department, and certainly staying within the reserve targets that we had as a group. We also recognize that the work, if it were accelerated, there'd probably still be a need on an ongoing basis in both of those areas. And so the reflective decision was to just allocate it out over the course of the 10 years and have funding available. If there are projects or initiatives that do come along that require us to think about accelerating the money, we could return to council and ask for your approval to accelerate it. I don't know if there's more to add, but maybe I'll end there. Thanks, Councillor.
Any follow-up? So yeah, is there any of the routine projects, council, that in Mr. Anderson's bailiwick that you'd like to move to non-routine? Okay, so seeing none, then I think the way I'd like to approach the meeting, if it makes sense, is then to approve recommendations 2, 3, and 4 at this point in time together as a group. So may I have a mover for that? Moved by Councillor Roach, seconded by Mayor McCabe. All in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Next up is Kelly Kiffer from the Waterloo Public Library. Welcome, Kelly. It's always good to see you. I will miss my time on the library board. Please proceed.
Good afternoon, Chair Freeman, Mayor McCabe, and Council. It's my pleasure to be here today to talk about the capital budget for 2023 for Waterloo Public Library. You can find the details on your capital budget page 41. So over the next 10-year period, you'll notice that there is $7 million planned for capital costs for Waterloo Public Library. The projected expenditure for 2023 is $839,000. The costs associated with these funds will address the needs for technology updates, facility and furnishing refurbishments, replacements, and costs associated with strategic planning, and of course, growth-connected costs for our collection. The graph here indicates the breakdown of growth versus rehabilitation spending planned for the library system over the next 10 years. The largest portion of planned expenses are connected to growth or a mix of growth and rehabilitation, 41% and 27% respectively. Rehabilitation projects would be items like the projects related to our furniture and fixtures refurbishment, and growth would be related to things like our collection. All of our capital budget projects are in support of the Healthy Community and Resilient Neighborhoods pillar. Annually, over 35,000 customers come to library programs and use our spaces, connect to neighbors with diverse interests, and authors, artists, performers, and more animate our spaces both in the physical and virtual spheres, creating opportunities for community members to experience and enjoy artistic expression from diverse perspectives. Our capital projects also support the strategic priority of equity, inclusion, and a sense of belonging. All of the 2023 capital projects for Waterloo Public Library are routine. This is the case for the majority of projects proposed for the next 10 years. I ask Council to approve the 2023 capital projects described here. That concludes my presentation, and I look forward to any questions you might have.
Thank you. Council, any questions for the C? Go ahead, Mayor McCabe.
Thanks very much, Kelly. Just wondering if, and maybe this is maybe not a question so much for you, but maybe it's for when the report on Bill 23 comes through. But I'm just wondering, do we have a sense yet of how Bill 23, and if we lose development charges, like what that impact may be to our ability to continue to expand our library, either what you've described here, but like potentially the opportunity to build another library? So
as far as I understand at this point, it's not impacting libraries directly, but in the larger budget scheme of demands, possibly.
Okay, thanks. Just I mean, libraries, as you've described, maybe not so much in this presentation, but previously are really, from my perspective, and I think a lot of people are a really critical part of our community and do a lot to help build, social equity for a wide variety of people. So I think it's just really important that we kind of keep our eye on how we support and continue to develop our library system for people who are here now, but for people who are coming. And I just hope that this isn't something that becomes challenging to fund with the ongoing issues with Bill 23. So anyway, that's I guess a comment more than a question.
No, it's okay.
just
And
wondering
actually,
yeah.
is it okay, Kelly, if I ask Philippa to add to your answer on the mayor's question? Because I seem to recall there was about 100 and some odd thousand that did come through on DCs annually to the library. So I just wanted to see if there's a little bit more information here that we should know. Is that okay?
Yes.
Thank you, through you, Chair Freeman, to Mayor McCabe. Certainly the library and the growth-related projects within the forecast are not unlike any other city-related growth projects that we need to be mindful of as we learn more and more about Bill 23 and what that could mean to our revenues and how that affects various projects, including library-related projects. So I would say that it's really a similar statement to what we've been talking about with regard to our own projects and having a look at what that means longer term. I certainly don't see there being a concern in the immediate with what's before you with regard to 2023 in the library. But as we know more about Bill 23, these are the things that we're going to have to look at and determine if there is an impact and what that could mean to different projects, including library projects.
Wow, I'm very worried about Bill 23 more broadly, so that's why I wanted to get more information. So Council, we have the routine projects for 2023 are on the screen in front of you. Are there any of those projects that you'd like to move to non-routine? I see none. May I have a mover for the recommendation number 5? Moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Bassett. All in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now we're turning over to our Corporate Services Department, and Philippa is going to provide our presentation.
Thank you again. And good afternoon, Chair Freeman, Mayor, and Council. Over the 10 years, the primary area of capital investment for corporate services is in the fleet management area, where nearly 90% of this budget line goes towards fleet equipment replacement, and about 10% goes towards expansion. And the next largest investment that you can see here is under new programs, which is specifically and entirely made up of the new CBC capital program, as it is the first year of the implementation of the Bill 108 legislation as far as the CBC program goes. And the third largest investment is in equipment replacement. This refers to non-fleet related equipment, and for corporate services, it's largely for various components of IT infrastructure, with the largest being for desktop and laptop replacements, cybersecurity, and fiber network. You're getting used to these slides. This next one, of course, being by growth versus rehabilitation. You can see that the majority of corporate services program over the 10 years is related to rehabilitation. We do see a substantial component for growth, which is in red, in 2023. And again, this is primarily related to the creation of the new CBC program. The smaller other areas in blue are mostly due to technology needs for PeopleSoft and OpenText. And our program, by strategic pillar, we see the recurring theme of infrastructure renewal, both in the 1 year and in the full 10-year program, as well as support for the strategic plan guiding principles, and in particular regarding fiscal responsibility, healthy and safe workplace, and service excellence. Investments related also to equity, inclusion, and sense of belonging are through the Public Engagement Capacity Initiative and the Digital Strategy, and sustainability in the environment through the open text upgrade integration are also noted for interest. And so for today, we are seeking approval of the routine classification of 19 projects with a value of $5.6 million in 2023, so that these may then be considered for Council's approval next week on February the 13th. And this relates to recommendations 6, 7, and 8 within the report. And now myself and the directors are happy to take any questions that you may have for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Philippa? Seeing none, the routine projects are on the screen. Did anyone want to move these from routine to non-routine? Seeing no. Sorry? Okay. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, she's going page by page. Sorry. It's not all of them. Yeah. So I'll just give you a minute. These are also in your budget books. Okay. So seeing no changes, do I have a mover for recommendations 6, 7, and 8? Moved by Councillor Vasek, seconded by Councillor Hanmer. All in favor? That's carried. Is that unanimous, Councillor Roach? Yes, sorry, I didn't see your hand. Thank you. So now we're moving on to our Community Services Department and Mr. Dykstra and his team, so welcome.
Thank you, Chair, Mayor, members of Council. Thank you for the opportunity to provide an update on the Community Services capital budget work that we've done for 2023 and through 2024. Over the next 10 years, $149 million in the various divisions for the capital budget for the 10-year forecast, and $25 million for this year's consideration. As you'll see here, the key items speak to that theme of facility refurbishment with $7.7 million, expansion as well related to growth, 6.6, and then equipment replacement, 3.2 million. Looking at where we see those areas of consideration, again, it's rehabilitation at 30%, growth at 39% growth at 30%, in the mix of the two at 17%, with legislative considerations and strategic at 14%, and that really speaks to our master planning work that we're doing within the department. Similarly, on this slide, you can see that focus is around healthy community and resilient neighborhoods and infrastructure renewal, both for the single year budget consideration and for the 10-year, and a number of the other pillars. We have touch points there as well. For Council today, we're looking for approval on $12.8 million related to our routine projects, and as well consideration of those non-routine for $12.3 million. Myself and the directors are here for questions from Council in consideration of these recommendations at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dykstra. Questions for our corporate services team? Our community services team. Councillor Bodley.
Thank you, through you, Chair Freeman. I just had a question about project number 211, which I know is not on this list right now for 2023, but I just wanted to highlight that project was in our previous capital budget in the year 2022, which has passed, and is now out in 2027. So I was just looking for some feedback from you about what has caused that project to be pushed out so far.
Through the chair to Councillor Bodley. Yes, the team looked at where we want to be with consideration of balancing the budget, understanding where the dollars are available for consideration of a further facility on the west side. And we also managed an understanding of where we want to be on our overall city master plan. So the rec master plan in 2024, getting updates on that, some work on our outdoor rec related to sports fields, and then Waterloo Park to get those completed, and then looking towards that next specific facility. So yes, has moved out, but it's aligning both with budget and just timing of other master plans to make sure we have a clear understanding of the needs for that added amenity.
Any other questions, Council? So let's just take a moment and maybe go page by page through through Commissioner Dykstra's pages and see if there's anything that we would like to move from routine to non-routine. So this one, let's just have a look here, scan through these. Okay, fire. Seeing none, okay. Municipal enforcement. So this is parks. And the next one's recreation. All right, I think that's everything for Mark's team. So seeing no changes, may I look for a mover for recommendation 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. Moved by Councillor Hanmer, seconded by Councillor Rowe. All in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dykstra. So we're now moving on to our Integrated Planning and Public Works Department. And we have a presentation from Commissioner Ormson. Welcome, Ron, and your team. And just a reminder, Council, before we start entering into a conversation about routine and non-routine projects with Mr. Ormson's team, we have a delegation this afternoon, Mr. Hawkins. So we'll hear from the delegation before we enter into deliberations as it relates to routine and non-routine projects. So Mr. Ormson, over to you.
Thank you, Chair Freeman. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mayor McCabe, members of council. This is the last but not least in the capital plan. In terms of the next 10-year window, the capital investment in integrated planning and public works will be approximately $597 million, spread across the 5 divisions. For 2023, the planned expenditures are approximately $66 million. And if you look at the summary that the finance team has kindly provided us today, there's about 26 key themes there. The bulk of which the dollars are allocated to the Transportation Services Division and the City's Utilities Division. There's about 130 project sheets in the budget package. And just so council has awareness about where they come from, for this department, they are informed by master plans, environmental assessment studies. Council may recall from last week, we are updating our sanitary master plan, for instance. but also the transportation master plan is a big driver for informing what goes into the budget, as are other things, streetscape studies, visioning studies that will be delivered in planning, for instance, and of course the city's asset management plan and decision support tool is a very important tool that informs where these budget dollars get allocated. In terms of the growth versus rehabilitation split, approximately 50% of the capital investment in the department over the 10-year projection is related to rehabilitation. The balance is a mixture of growth-related, growth and rehabilitation, other, and then the legislated or strategic category. In terms of link back to the strategic pillars, as you can see by the shape of the graph, largely it is driven by the infrastructure renewal, and again, those dollars in transportation and utilities mainly. There is one request that we have of council today, and it's to reconsider the way a couple of projects were initially included in the budget documents. So for these particular three projects, reference 538, which is for the routine cleaning of sediment ponds, 570, which is for the relining of water mains that are structurally deficient, so it's going in trenchlessly and putting in sleeves and things to extend the life of water mains under roads that will not be reconstructed. And then lastly, 670, which is our contribution to the regional project, which was the reconstruction of Weber Street to pay for our portion of water main work. So these projects fall well under the threshold, $2.5 million threshold. They are not of significant public interest and they're not controversial. So this is before council as a minor shift in what we're proposing today. So I draw your attention to the non-routine line in each one of the graphs. And you'll see that before reclassification, we had approximately $38 million, and that will move or shift down to $35 million. The end expenditures are the same. It's just making this adjustment so that these projects do not have to return to council. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ormson. Council, questions? Yep. Councillor Wright.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Freeman. I'm just curious about the your pie chart where you have the sustainability reflected. Yeah, right in there. Okay, so we're at roughly 10% in the 2023 capital budget, and I'm just curious about how you classify that, because so much of infrastructure is actually infrastructure for sustainability and for public health outcomes. Could you just speak to that a little bit briefly?
Through you, Chair Freeman, that's an excellent question, Councillor Wright, and I think I would ask maybe the finance team to weigh in here as well, but you've picked up on something that's very important. They're not mutually exclusive categories, you're right. So for instance, there would be water-related works, storm, sanitary, wastewater that would have a very important sustainability aspect of them that have been lumped into the infrastructure renewal category, and they won't be broken out specifically. Whereas other ones that are, let me call a pure play on environmental work, for example, and I forget the actual budget reference, but there's a line item for low impact development, stormwater management measures in Councillor Freeman's ward. Those types of projects are not specifically related to renewing existing infrastructure, but they are a class of their own in terms of environmental sustainability, and they would be represented in that breakdown. So it is important to look at this carefully and not assume that there are not other environmental sustainability initiatives included in the overall rehab budget.
Did you have a follow-up? Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Yep, Councillor Bodley.
Thank you, through you, Chair Freeman. I wanted to highlight something that I noted in this year's capital budget, a number of routine items here, and then ask a question about it. So these are, I don't think it's necessary to bring these up, but I'll highlight them just to note. 685, 687, 691, 697. These are level 2 PXOs, sidewalk replacements, traffic calming, and traffic studies. And I just wanted to note and thank staff, because each of those areas of concern for council have been increased substantially from previous budgets. And I guess my question is, can you maybe speak a little bit to how that translates into what residents are likely to see on those topics when it comes to traffic calming and more PXOs and stuff like that? Because I think this is a big ask that we've received as council in the past, and like I said, I wanted to acknowledge staff's work in increasing the numbers there.
Thank you, Councillor Bodley, through you, Chair Freeman. I actually might call upon Bob Henderson, Director of Transportation, just to build on this answer, Councillor. But obviously, this is part and parcel of the implementation of the Transportation Master Plan with respect to the Vision Zero goal. And it's to look at trying to encourage people to feel safer on our active transportation routes, not only in school zones, but other places where they may not feel safe in crossing a road with respect to other traffic in the network. But specifically to PXOs, I'll turn it over to Bob in case he can add in anything else.
Thank you, Ron. Through you to Councillor Bodley. The installation of PXOs is an important piece of the pie in terms of increasing mobility throughout the city. We certainly recognize and see that device helping increase mobility near school zones and to complement the trail connections intersecting with the city road system as well.
And just for maybe some clarity for any residents that may be watching here, because one of the things when we talk about routine versus non-routine is like high public interest. And anytime a PXO is to go in, anytime there's a traffic study, anytime there's traffic calming, obviously these things have high public interest for the folks who are in that area. And I just wanted to, I don't think these things need to be coming back to council. I think you guys need to have a process, and that makes sense. And I fully support these being routine items. But I'm wondering if you could maybe speak to how these will be prioritized so residents who are so passionate about these things can get a better understanding of that.
Certainly. So they'll be prioritized by staff through existing traffic data accounts. So we'll understand where there's high priorities in terms of pedestrian volumes, necessitating PXOs to help get those people across roads. That will also be supplemented through feedback from the community, feedback through council in terms of high priority areas where they see it being fit.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Rowe.
Through you, Chair. This is just an interest question. I'm looking at item number 654, student accommodation monitoring. So I'm wondering if you can just give me a little bit more information about that.
Sure. Through you, Chair Freeman, to Councillor Rowe. I'll actually ask Mr. Cotter to talk about that one for accuracy.
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, I'm just looking here at item 654, student accommodation monitoring. So I was just wondering what that entails. That's just new to me, so I'm just curious.
Through you, Chair Freeman, to the councillor. It's with respect to a survey that we've done in the past and monitoring student accommodations. I believe it's set to reoccur in the near future. There were some delays just because of COVID and students residing in the community. So we're looking kind of for that base data. And again, we provide kind of an annual amount for a set frequency to go back and just update our information to determine, what the status of student employment is student accommodation is within the community, so we can help establish policy and do our planning a little bit more refined.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Vasek.
Thanks through you, Chair Freeman. Ron, similar question to Councillor Bodley, but about 635, the affordable housing strategy. I don't necessarily want to make this non-routine because we need to move forward with that really important work, but given it is of high public interest, affordable housing and affordability of housing, what are other ways that the public and council are going to be informed and updated on this work?
Through you, Chair Freeman. Thanks for that question also, Councillor Vasic, because I know it is very important, although it doesn't fit nicely into one of the other categories. The reason for it non-routine or routine here is just to get the ball rolling in terms of the funding, but you're absolutely right. There will be more opportunity for the public to weigh in on this important matter, namely when the staff report comes forward next month, and I believe that's set for March 20th. There are 2 active surveys also on Engage Waterloo, one for the affordable housing strategy itself and one for the inclusionary zoning study. Michelle Lee, who, as council may recall, is the project manager for this, advises me that there will also be other opportunities for the public to weigh in when there may be changes to our official plan policy, zoning bylaw, and other planning instruments when we try to adjust the affordable housing requirements.
Thanks very much.
Councillor Wright.
Thanks. I just have a quick clarification question regarding lines 632 and 663. So this is the University Gateway, which is routine, and 663, which is the Waterloo, which is non-routine. And I'm just because those 2 things are so proximate to each other, and the Waterloo Loop actually goes across the university very close to where that Gateway project begins. I'm just wondering whether there is coordination between those 2 projects. Thanks.
Yes, through you, Chair Freeman, to Councillor Wright. There will be coordination. I'm going to ask Joel to layer in here. I believe there'll be some joint work between engineering and planning on it, but since the Gateway project is led in through the planning division, I'll get Joel to answer that question.
Sure, through you, Chair Freeman, to the councillor. Certainly we look at all aspects of adjoining lands and infrastructure when we're looking at ways to implement the University Avenue Gateway strategy, this being one of them. So certainly we'll look at those types of connections when we focus in on that particular area of University Avenue.
Any other questions? Mayor McCabe.
Thanks. Through you, Councillor Freeman. Just to follow up on Councillor Bodley's question about the pedestrian crossings, and you were moving the Blythewood to Northfield into the routine. Is that going to incorporate? I'm just thinking back to a couple of weeks ago when we had the developer here talking about the potential project in that. Is that going to incorporate a new pedestrian crossing, or is there going to be something there? There was a lot of discussion that night about if that development goes ahead, the increase in amount of people and foot traffic or cycling and et cetera. So is that going to be incorporated in that?
Through you, Chair Freeman, to Mayor McKay. Actually, the Weber Street reconstruction that was undertaken by the region did include multi-use pathway on one side. So there is some extra AT infrastructure already there. But yes, to answer your question, Mayor, when the Drulo development proceeds and the other trail connections behind the current Inn of Waterloo property are developed, we'll have to look at that network and make sure that there's proper desire lines for crossing and safe crossings for everyone out there. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for Ron? Okay, Ron, I want to hear from Mr. Hawkins first, and then we'll manage. Maybe you want to leave the one slide up that you're recommending on the non-routine to routine, because I just don't want to lose sight of that ask. Mr. Hawkins, did you have a presentation? Okay, great. So thank you, Ron. So, Mr. Hawkins, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Freeman. Everyone's been so quick today. I'll try and also be quick. I'm sure you have a long day ahead of you. I'm here on behalf of Activa Holdings Limited and Northgate Land Corp. And they are 2 proponents of draft plans of subdivision in the Beaver Creek Meadows District. And the 3rd proponent of a subdivision, Cook Homes and Mattamy Homes, as well as Activa and Northgate, have had extensive discussions amongst themselves, as well as with city staff with regard to the Beaver Creek Road and Conservation Drive reconstruction project. And for councillors who aren't as familiar with a bit of the history, and I'm sure It's covered by staff in other forms, but essentially the environmental assessment and the district planning for this area occurred and was approved back in 2015. And since that time, the development applications have moved along to the point now where they are close to being brought to fruition, but they do rely upon the reconstruction and the infrastructure that goes with the reconstruction of those two roads. And for councillors who haven't had the opportunity to spend time in this lovely part of Northwest Waterloo, in both of the wards of Councillor Roach and Councillor Bodley, those two roads are effectively rural cross-sections today, from where the urbanized portions terminate on just north of Laurelwood Drive for Beaver Creek Road, and then west of the Conservation Meadows community on Conservation Drive. And so there really isn't any opportunity for pedestrians or cyclists to use those roads to connect to any other part of Waterloo. The traffic in the area is steadily increasing. So there's a lot of safety concerns that go with the current configuration of those roads and the connections that they do provide to a lot of city facilities, as well as Laurelwood Public School, St. Nicholas Catholic School, Laurel Heights Secondary School, and of course the YMCA and the library at Fisher Hallman and Laurelwood. So those two roads are sort of main arteries in Northwest Waterloo and are key for the active transportation connections that they will provide as part of the design of those roads that would be realized through the reconstruction that's tabled in the staff report before council today. In addition to all of the safety improvements that would occur as a result of the reconstruction projects, of course, there are 3 plans of subdivisions that would be brought to the market if that reconstruction occurred, and countless homes that would be made available in a wide range of formats, from singles to semis and towns, stacked towns, back-to-back in apartment buildings, the full range of housing that would be made available for families looking to move into Waterloo, looking to relocate within Waterloo to a different location, or looking for different types of housing. So this reconstruction project is a key deliverable for improving the safety and the transportation in Northwest Waterloo, but also for bringing on much needed family housing. And in this regard, Activa and Northgate are in support of staff's recommendation number 19 in the report, and that the council approve option 1, the status quo, that it remain within the 2023 capital budget. Thank you, Chair Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. Any questions for the delegation? Seeing none, thank you so much. Okay, council, so at this point in time, I would like to get a sense of how we'd like to approach these recommendations. My recommendations, does anyone want to make any changes to these recommendations? Obviously, we need to give consideration to the request that Mr. Ormson has made for moving these non-routine items into routine. So just looking to see if there's, Councillor Bodley.
Yes, thank you, Chair Freeman. I'm hoping we could vote on including Mr. Ormson's recommendations there on pulling 19, which is related to project number 600, as I have an alternative proposal.
Okay, thank you. So that being said, can we just go through then the projects we'll do 15, 16, 17, 18, 20, 21, and 22. So maybe we can look at the sheets to see if there's anything we'd like to move from routine to non-routine. And when we get to item 20, the Appendix E, I'm hopeful that that's where we can make the changes that consider the changes that Mr. Ormson has recommended. So the building standards projects are listed before you. Is there any changes from routine to non-routine? Seeing none, we'll look at city utilities. Okay, no changes there. Stormwater. So this one, 538, is one of the ones that Mr. Ormson has requested us to consider. Do I have someone that, how do we want to do this? Do we need to move it as Julie?
We can build that into the recommendation so that
Okay.
council would be approving Appendix E with the 3 projects being reclassified.
All right, so maybe I'm going to approach it this way. Is anyone contrary minded to moving those 3 projects to routine? Okay, so that being said, we can move them all to routine, please. Okay, that's great. So let's just have a quick look at engineering services projects to make sure that we haven't overlooked anything there. So see no changes there. Planning projects. All right. And transportation services. Okay, then council, can I have a motion to move items 15, 16, 17, 18, 20, 21, and 22? Moved by Councillor Vasek, seconded by Councillor Rowe. All in favor? That's carried unanimously. Councillor Bodley, you had an alternative motion for item 19?
Yes, and I would ask if staff can put that up, please. I won't read it. I'll let council read that. But essentially, I'm suggesting a modified version of option 3 in our report from staff, which recommends deferring this project until 2024 to 2026. And if I have a seconder, I'd be happy to give some justification and explanation as to why.
As seconded by Councillor Vasek. You can fight over it.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Freeman. So in the report and as demonstrated by staff, the city simply does not have a significant unallocated DC reserve fund balance. And as we are making our way through the 2023 capital budget and the 2024 to 2032 capital forecast, we can see numerous capital projects funded in whole or in part with development charges with a high importance to existing residents of the city of Waterloo. Projects like land servicing for Generation Park, which will create jobs for the community, highlight our sustainability efforts in green buildings, and more. A West Side recreation facility to accommodate recreation needs in a growing area of our city, countless plans and studies cross-divisional needed to account for growth, sewer sanitary stormwater upgrades needed for a growing city, many other new projects for a growing city. And as staff have noted, the Beaver Creek Conservation Road reconstruction is our largest DC funded project, with a total DC related cost of $56 million and a total project cost of $68 million. So what is this project for? It involves a full road reconstruction of Beaver Creek and conservation drives. It involves the extension of services along the rural portions of these streets. It involves the construction of 2 new pumping stations. While there will indeed be some benefits, as outlined by Mr. Hawkins, reaped by existing residents, the vast majority of this project is to support the new housing development in Beaver Creek Meadows. I fully recognize that we are in a housing crisis. I believe that this will be a vibrant community, again, as Mr. Hawkins noted, with mixed housing types. It will be a wonderful place to live in one of the few remaining greenfield development areas of the city. I want these homes to be built in support of efforts towards tackling the supply side issues we have related to the affordability of housing in Waterloo. But this is a 100% purely growth is supposed to pay for growth scenario. And given the uncertainty that we have around Bill 23, with current staff estimates of $23 to $31 million in lost DC revenue over the next 5 years, projected tax increases of an additional 7 to 10% contemplated to make up for that lost revenue, in my mind, it would be financially irresponsible of us to move this project forward in 2023 without having full certainty around how DC revenues and the losses imposed upon us are going to be felt by the province's legislation. And that's why I'm recommending that we defer this project until the 24 to 26 timeframe. Hopefully that gives us enough time to more fully understand the financial implications related to Bill 23. And just to wrap up, as I noted, I realize that this may mean that the much needed housing development may not be able to proceed as quickly as possible. And I think it is entirely a shame that the Bill 23 More Homes Built Faster Act is in fact very likely to see more homes built more slowly. But these are the unintended consequences of deviating away from a growth pays for growth model. I hope these entirely predictable outcomes, which are very likely to be seen in municipalities across the province, will give the province pause on some of the financial challenges that are posed by Bill 23. And I would ask Council for consideration of that.
So, Council, the motion has been moved and seconded. Is there any other discussion on this item? Councillor Vasek has a question, yeah?
Yeah, can I have a question of staff? Of
Absolutely,
Philippa?
yep.
I'm just gonna not look. Okay. I get the sense that we're going to have a much better sense about DCs over this coming year. So can you just reaffirm that confidence that I think I've heard from you, but I just want to make sure so that I understand that if we have a better understanding, would we be able to better consider this next year through the next budget cycle as Councillor Bodley is proposing?
Through you, Chair Freeman, to Councillor Vasek. That is certainly our hope. Obviously, we still await regulation on Bill 23, and the province, we've been hearing that they intend to keep municipalities whole, but we don't know what that looks like or when that may or may not happen as far as the details around that. And so we certainly hope that in the coming months, we will know more and be in a much better position to have this conversation with council as part of the 3-year budget.
Thank you.
Any other questions of staff? Mayor McCabe.
Not a question, but just a comment to echo Councillor Bodley's comments that it really, this does sound like a really good project, and certainly one, as Councillor Bodley said, that we need, that we recognize, we know we need more homes, and it's a mixed use development, which is really good. There's a lot of really great qualities there, but I agree with Councillor Bodley that this would be financially irresponsible for us to move ahead with a project like this when we don't know, we don't have that line of sight and that certainty that says that we will have the funding needed from the development charges in order to build out the infrastructure necessary to create this community. So I do hope that our provincial friends take note of this, and maybe other municipalities too. And we would like to know sooner rather than later about what's going to be in these regulations in Bill 23. And the more certainty we have, the sooner we have certainty around this, the better. So that because we do clearly want to build more homes. We do want to build them as quickly as we can, but we do need this funding, and it's not fair it's not fair for us to contemplate putting this on the existing taxpayer base to build this future community. So I just want to echo Councillor Bodley's comments, and I'm happy to let Councillor Vasek second the motion, but I can be the so thank you very much for that.
Any other comments, Councillor Roach?
Philippa, through you, Chair, can you just remind us what the Minister has said with regard to development charges with non-affordable housing and affordable housing? I thought I heard recently that there's been some kind of question with regard to that.
Through you, Chair Freeman, to Councillor Roach. What we understand from the legislation is that certainly there's very much of a focus on affordable, attainable, and rental. And so the legislation completely exempts affordable and attainable, and then reduces rental development charges depending on the number of bedrooms that are built. And that's very, very clear in the legislation. The other part of the legislation that is currently, I would say, up for perhaps conversation that we're seeing is the 5-year phase-in of all development charge values, regardless of the type of the development, whether it's non-residential or residential, and what type of residential it is. And that is a pretty significant piece of the financial calculations that we've been looking at. And so We're very clear on the affordable piece and attainable, other than, of course, some of the definitions around that still have to come back through regulation, as well as the rental. It's really the 5-year phase-in that seems to apply to all development. And there has been some, conversation out there that Bill 23 doesn't apply to all development, but that aspect of the legislation seems to. It applies to all development, and that is a pretty material piece of the equation. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Wright?
Through you, Chair, I would just like to clarify 2 details regarding this. One is, what is the time frame that we think these houses would actually be built and then, be subject to potential development charges if they're eligible? And secondly, because what I'm hearing is concerns about the financial risks as the city undertakes under the status quo arrangement. So what alternative kinds of financing arrangements are undertaken by municipalities in these sorts of contexts where there might be a cost-sharing type arrangement?
Through you, Chair Freeman, to Councillor Wright. Thanks for both of those questions. I think the first one's harder to answer than the second one, so I'll start with it. Obviously, as soon as services are available to lands and the right arrangements are in place, namely securities are posted and the proper subdivision agreements are in place, it sort of opens the way for developers to start looking at moving forward and getting lots prepped and ready. Generally speaking, in most greenfield type scenarios, you're talking on the order of years to get there, certainly not within a year. In this particular case, there are 2 sanitary pumping stations that must be built as well, so that has to be factored into the timeline. So hopefully that will give you a sense of sort of the immediate timeline. We're talking at least 2 years, I would say. But then I would also say that it really depends on the market, right? Fortunately, as Mr. Hawkins mentioned, in this particular area of the city, there's a wide range of housing that's proposed. So conceivably, market uptake wouldn't be a problem and that we'd start seeing things being built pretty quickly. But then again, it hinges on interest rates. It hinges on a lot of other things. So that's a really tough question to pin down in terms of when the number of units would be available. In terms of alternative arrangements, one of the recommendations is for an advanced timing of infrastructure agreement, which the city has used with developers in the past. And the way those agreements are structured is that the developer essentially fronts the costs for the infrastructure with the promise from the municipality to be paid back when the DC dollars are available to do so. So the timing of repayment is also contingent upon the ability for the municipality to collect DC revenue. In that sense, it shifts the risk to the developer. And there are also scenarios whereby there is a mixture of advanced timing and municipal money as well. So there could be a combination of the 2 arrangements at play as well. Yeah.
Thank you. And I just have one follow-up question, which has more to do with generally building costs tend to go up over time. And so in the context of deferring this, even to the next fiscal or previous or potentially beyond this fiscal till we have some more certainty about DCs, what does that do to that budget line? I know that's sort of hypothetical again, but if you could just comment to that, please.
Through you, Chair Freeman. No, that's a fair question, Councillor Wright, and staff have been wrestling with changes in the economy as well. So I would say we could look at it twofold. One is, you're right, materials costs, labor really never get cheaper as time moves forward. However, the competition for that work may actually change based on the overall market conditions. And what I can tell you, based on early tender information we're getting for projects this year through Francis's team in engineering services, we're seeing actually costs come in lower than we had expected. So when this particular project was priced, it was during the pandemic. We're using pandemic numbers and a high rate, high inflation environment. which I think has skewed the cost upward. So I'm actually hopeful that we might see a softening in construction costs. We're seeing more bids, which is always a good indication that there's more capacity in the market to deliver work, which generally means the service providers aren't charging a premium that they could when the market is red hot.
Councillor Hanmer.
Thank you, through you, Chair Freeman, to Commissioner. In the revised motion put forward by my colleague, the suggestion is that we continue to plan and do the design work based on the funding that's released to date. Is there enough funding to continue that work should we choose to defer to next year?
Through you, Chair Freeman, yes, the short answer is, Councillor Hamner, we do have sufficient funds. I think it's on the order of about $6 million. So that's been released. I'm not sure how much of that has been spent, but there is sufficient funds in order to complete the design and get this project tender ready.
So work will continue with it?
Work will continue, for certain, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? So I think I just wanted to seek a bit more clarity, if I might, on Councillor Wright's question. So if DC's funds are not available for this ever, am I right in assuming that to do this work, we'd have to debenture it, and that would go against our debt to service ratio on an annual capacity?
Through you, Chair Freeman, to you, back to you. That would certainly be an option, and in fact, that the debenture option was what staff have been contemplating as part of this actual budget submission. And so if Council wants to move forward with the 2023 construction portion of the project, we would be looking to debenture for those funds, because at this point in time, the revenues that are projected, and this is not necessarily completely tied to Bill 23, it's because of the magnitude of the project. It is putting our reserves into a negative, which I think Council has seen back in December when we brought forth the Reserve and Reserve Fund report. And so the intention was to debenture for this, but the longer term concern is whether or not the revenues really will be there. And that's where Bill 23 comes into the mix. This is a timing issue because of the magnitude of this project, but Bill 23 further potentially compounds that if in fact, municipalities aren't made whole for that, and could result in a much longer time frame for those funds to be collected. And so the debenture route would certainly be something that staff would recommend. And then beyond that, we would look at potential other options. And of course, we've talked about the tax base, but that would be, further conversations and future conversations with Council on that front in the coming years and in the coming budget cycle.
Thank you. So there's a motion on the table, Council. Is there any more discussion on it? Seeing none, all in favor? Those contrary minded? So that's negative, okay. So there's 2 opposed, and that carries. Thank you. So with that, we are now recessed until 6:30 this evening, at which time Councillor Bodley will be taking over the chair. And I just would like to say thank you for your heavy lifting today. This is a lot of important work that will support our work next Monday.